if I think about the first conversations I had around AI was probably about, 3 or 4 years ago, in any meaningful conversation. And everyone felt like it was this crazy thing. It was this.
I remember it was amazing.
Amazing, it could do everything, and it's going to do all this outlandish stuff. It's going to change the world, and it's going to be, oh wow. No one knew that AI is going to be, one day you're going to make your dad look like a sausage that can speak, right?
Have you been on my search history?
Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Nick, joined by my co-host Hannah. Today we're going to be talking about will AI run out of power, basically, with Steve. Thanks for coming, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
If you just give us a bit of an overview of your career and your journey.
Oh gosh, my goodness. So first things first, I started out my data center journey working for a power and cooling company called Agreco, which is an international company that deals with a lot of critical infrastructure in data centers and solving riddles. And that firmly moved into more of a cooling environment. I got more involved in cooling. Ended up in Swegon as a Swedish manufacturer. Then moved over to Stultz on the selling of data center cooling into that marketplace. Was there for 5 years as director. And then moved into my current role, which is the lead for data center vertical market for GB&I for Siemens. On the power side and the sort of smart infrastructure and digitization side. So it's it's a
Nice.
interesting journey,
Cool.
to say the least.
Busy.
Yeah,
You're a power guy.
yeah.
So I read a stat somewhere that data centers are causing a 253% increase in cost of energy to local residents where they're built. Found that quite interesting.
Wow, that's an interesting stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how true it was. But
The challenge I would say to that is, it wouldn't surprise me if that's right, just because the way in which the power infrastructure has traditionally been devised, right? So if you look at data centers now, there's a lot of talk around power and how it's actually working. And in the past, it was just measurements of energy, measurements of whether high performing energy or low performing energy, right? The smart way of dealing with power use now is the power use. What is it being used for? Are there systems in place that are smart systems that can actually work to the providers and work with the people that are using them and shut things down when it needs to be shut down and use that power when necessary, or seek out other integrated systems around hybrid systems, or battery systems that can be used at a particular time instead of it being just, straight off the grid. And that's a key component of data centers, why traditionally they have got that bad name to a certain degree. But systems are becoming smarter, more optimization, more integration, much more AI being used, funny enough, in the systems themselves.
Yeah.
That convergence of smart infrastructure, you could say, and digitization sort of coming together. And that makes for, better use of energy and a more efficient way of use of energy. Now, if we look at it like that, that's a whole different conversation that's being mapped out. But if you look at it from a traditional source, in the past, look, if I go back 20 years ago, right?
Yep.
I remember going to, and this is no word of a lie, 20 years ago, I went to my first site I ever went to. And I think I might have told you this story. I don't know if I did, but I arrived there and I used to work for Agreco, which is a power company, right? Predominantly, but they do cooling as well. Yeah. And they rent out equipment for, critical sites. I arrived there, they said, go look at this site. They want you there now. So on the car, came around the corner, right? Went in.
Never getting in a car on the street.
Never getting in a car on the street. I see 2 fire engines with fire hoses, aiming their fire hose, but a ton of guys aiming their hose. And I'm going, I'm at the wrong side. I must be at the wrong side. So I call up.
Was there a fire?
I'll explain. I call the customer. I call the customer. I go. I'm at the site. I can see 2 fire engines blocking up. And they're literally putting. What are you guys away from the site? And I go, no, come in. So I'm like, okay. So I gingerly walk into this building, And then I realized the fire engines are there to cool down the cooling systems on the roof.
Oh yeah, I've been to a site where in summer the guys have had to be standing, like I used to run transitions and ops and live and literally had, when it's been a really hot summer, not that long ago, pouring water and getting hose pipes on top to keep it
Absolutely
cool.
right. They had, and it was literally tons of, so you can
That was like
imagine
2 years ago.
how many thousands of gallons would be used on that day to save that site. You know, from going down, and it was a transmission site, so I understand what would have happened to the internet should it die, right? But I was in awe, and I was like, more. Because I left the site going, and I said, oh yeah, we got to bring this, do this, and do that, and do this, and do that, right? In the end, we kind of helped out, but I was really shocked. But nothing went in my mind that this was, you know, the best use or the worst use of water.
Yeah,
you know?
it doesn't cross your mind until you really. It's, I guess the media make it look very black and white when you think about power utilization in data centers. But actually, you're right. You know, we've got some really incredible minds who work in the space. And I do sometimes listen, and I'm in awe. And yeah, they think about the most effective use of power. They think about the fact that you need to switch and you need to, you know, redirect power at peak times and all the other systems. Whereas normally when you think about a data centers, people go, so many megawatts, this power, this land, this site. When actually the reality is that's very much true at a transaction stage when you're acquiring a site. It's very much true at a project stage when you're building the thing, but it's not the case when you actually have to operate it from a live environment perspective. It's a whole other ball game. Yeah,
you're absolutely right, and in that sense, you know, that's why if I was going to talk about data centers and be very, how can I put it, not diplomatic, fly the flag a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We're in an environment where it invites criticism.
Yeah.
And because it invites criticism means that you have to rise to the occasion to being criticized, right? So you're in a strategic point where you're putting a new data center together. The first thing that any new operator will not say is, throw anything at it, we'll just have power, who cares, we've got tons of cash, right? You know, no one does that, right? And they don't go to an area, right, which is a nice green site where everyone's like, the butterflies are flying, right? We're gonna concrete that over, who needs it? Everyone wants a click, right? Don't go with that in mind. In fact, in the industry, we have more conversations around sustainability, you know, carbon use, the use of water, the use of power, the use of techniques, the use of technology than probably anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, there's very few other industries that spend so much of their time focused on that, because you will be heavily criticized, you will be penalized for it, you will be regulated around these considerations, and your reaction to that will denote what happens next with your business.
Yep.
Right?
But also, I guess from a sector perspective, you have to be efficient. There's only so much of it.
Big time.
So actually, we can't afford to be laxy-daisy on that topic at all. Because we literally don't have enough. Yeah. And so we have to get creative, and we are trying to be, but there's more to be done. I mean, Steve, I had a question for you. So you're in power, right?
Yes.
And everyone talks about power in our industry.
Yeah.
Tell us about what that means really, instead of just talking about having power available. What does it really mean in the world that we're in right now?
Oh gosh, in the world we are in right now, especially with regards to AI, right? Because I think AI was a mystery for many years. You know, if I think about the first conversations I had around AI was probably about, 3 or 4 years ago, in any meaningful conversation. And everyone felt like it was this crazy thing. It was this.
I remember it was amazing.
Amazing. It could do everything, and it's going to do all this outlandish stuff. It's going to change the world, and it's going to be, oh wow. No one knew that AI is going to be, one day you're going to make your dad look like a sausage that can speak, right?
Have you been on my search history?
And do funny flips every now and then, right? You know, and say Merry Christmas at the end. You know? No one knew that. No one knew that, right? Who would have known?
Christmas cards.
It's the most human thing to do, isn't it? It's like the most useless.
Isn't it, right? It is. But the effects. So power is the, one of the backbones of infrastructure for data centers. data centers in a sense would not exist without power, right? Because power comes first, and the infrastructure, laying down the foundations. Once you've done all of those things, then you look for the power, or you've done that research around power and the accessibility of power, right? That powers everything from cooling to servers to the lighting system, security, everything that needs electricity. What does that mean for us as structurally, infrastructure-wise, is that's a lot of systems. That's a lot of number crunching. That's a lot of designing and that's a lot of planning and a lot of foundational work that needs to be done in order for you to have that system working properly, okay? That's a lot of engineering, that's a lot of focus. That's a lot of service and maintenance and application to that site. So power for me is not a nuanced conversation. It's actually a very much a demand conversation. And when it comes to demand, data centers are very demanding, okay? And they run 24/7. They're non-stop. They're like that baby that you had and you wish you didn't have because, your 2 o'clocks are no longer 2 o'clocks in the morning.
I don't feel that way. The parents in one, I've talked about no sleep. James, Mama still loves you.
They don't sleep.
Our last podcast was about lack of sleep
really?
parenting,
Okay.
so that's why I'm just putting it.
Good. All the parents in the house definitely get it. So,
Steve, do you have children?
I do.
Okay.
I have 4.
You have 4?
Yeah.
But you didn't mean that, did you, about baby that you didn't?
No, I didn't. No. I love you all.
There
I
we
love
go.
you all.
There we go.
You're the apples of my eye.
There.
Of my eyes. Yes. But yes, in terms of the actual conversation piece itself, power is a very wide-ranging subject. If you take that onto a political space, let's just say, power is about the amount of demand, the amount that's actually given to certain places, right? And every DNO throughout the country knows this. Power can be swapped, given, bartered, right? But how it acts, the realization of that is that it actually affects everyone. And that's a lot of responsibility. If you think about a data center that says, I'm going to build a 250 megawatt center in the middle of this area, what does that mean to that area? What does that mean to the people who work there? How is it structured? How's the demand mitigated in terms of, use? And how it's, these are not circumstantial conversations.
Yeah.
These are conversations that are pre-conversations and post-conversations. And the only way that you can actually deal with power effectively is by having the necessary systems all in place before you even press go, right? And that has got to be done as a real holistic viewpoint now. I think we've reached the point with power, especially when you're talking about grid demands and things like that. We've reached the point now where it's like gone beyond the grid demand. We're now looking at, how do you harvest power? How do you sustain that power? How do you look at renewable sources in order for you to keep those systems going? And how do you not make so much of demand on the grid? And those are real discussions, whether that's going to be nuclear energy, whether that's going to be battery systems, whether that's going to be, wind, solar, whatever it's going to be. All of those systems working sometimes in concert in order for you to deliver your goals. The AI piece has just made it supersonic, right? And that's why I sort of, mentioned before about that sort of almost like that runaway train kind of thing. We're moving from being in the nice ChatGPT, if I can mention names, and then all the rest
I've
of them.
already accidentally plugged about 25 companies.
Yeah.
Gemini, it's mentioned all of them, right? It's
Mentioned all,
mentioned
yeah, exactly.
every single, AI
call us.
tool that you use. Right? We're moving on from that stage now. We're going into what we call I always wonder where these names come. Agentic stage. The agentic stage. I heard a lot of this through DCW.
Okay.
The physical infrastructure AI is a whole different beast. The physical infrastructure AI is talking about AI where in principle it does things without you asking it to do it.
Yep.
Right? That space now becomes like your automated friend, right? That real kind of, and leads towards things like robotics in the real sense.
Yep.
Leads towards your car really being driverless and taking you places. When we're in that stage now, that phase, the infrastructure around power's got to be so keen and so optimized and so keyed in to kind of minimize mistakes, because mistakes will happen,
Yeah.
right? And if those mistakes are minimized and we're working with those kind of infrastructures in place, then you've got to think about that whole cycle of how these different parts and those renewable sources all work in tandem. That, can you imagine just taking one energy source and working that through, but taking several and making them work together? That's where we're at.
And I guess also to add to that, the output of that.
Oh my
so the
gosh.
output, and then there's, so you talk specifically about input, but there's also a whole piece that goes with the output.
Yeah. The output part of this, you know, and the managed way in which that is structured is another one. That sort of digitization of, you know, aligning itself with the infrastructure, the physical structure, is what's in place now. And these are the things that, you know, we work on a regular basis. You know, the output of what's happening on the other end, where's it going, has been distributed, has been accounted for.
How's it not wasted?
Has not wasted.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And principally how, you know, again, to ensure that that measurement is correct, to have those tools in place to grab that data and to give that data and bring it across. All of those things are the things that we work on now. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I was going to say my everyday at this moment in time, you know, is talking to the digital guys, you know, in our teams, is talking to the smart infrastructure guys in our teams, and look at the bedded down infrastructure and saying, how do you cross-pollinate? How do you get them going? And how do you keep them functioning within that arena that allows for you to actually instigate that kind of change, and the change that people want to see, as opposed to, you know, we're just doing it because it has a need.
Yeah.
You're kind of like going, okay, if we don't get that right, that's not going to happen.
Yep.
And we need and us as human beings, as smart as we are, right, and as great as we can be, we can't make those computations ourselves. So we need to have things in place that actually do deliver that kind of goal.
Yep.
And are put in place to measure those outcomes. So yeah.
It's really interesting, and I think we talked earlier about the cost of energy, where data centers are placed, but actually we have a huge opportunity to contribute back, not just through hiring and through skills, but, you know, we talk about heat reuse and some of the outputs conversations, but there's a whole piece around sustainability where we can, as you know, if we do things in the right way, and I think we'll be regulated. I don't know what you think, but I think regulators will require us to give back to those communities and to be able to heat local homes or local community centres, because the reality is we're just utilising so much of that power from the grid that they would have previously had access to, driving up cost.
You're absolutely right, and I agree completely. And I would say that we've not reached a stage, certainly in this part of the world, where we've seen, you know, dropouts in power as a result of it. Happens. Don't get me wrong, right?
In Asia.
Oh my God.
Mainly in Asia.
And you know, and you know, governments saying, you don't need power, you know, we're going to shift that over to here, right? Yeah. Luckily, and touch wood, you don't see that ever, right? But there is a reality around how much power there is available, you know, a real ceiling point that we're reaching with regards to the extent that it can go to. And that means that you've got to be able to have systems in place that enables for those situations where there is a great peak, to have another system running that can actually still maintain the status quo. And that realization is about, you know, the use of these other sources. You know, I'm very, very much very, very excited about the sort of DC space in that. You know, that battery infrastructure and enablement is a real focus. I mean, back in the day, DC was just what? If your power goes down, UPS kicks in, right? You know, and then you're like, yay!
Exactly.
Right?
We've got to finally use those generators.
We've got to use the generator. And those batteries, they actually work, right? Or the matter didn't work.
Oh, they didn't work.
Right?
Or get the firemen.
But now we're talking about an approach which says, you know, battery technology has got so far now that we can store power, we can store energy in a great application, and that for me is an exciting space, because that allows people to then say, at that time we don't really have that much going on, so we can probably use that power, and we've harnessed that, so we can use that power, and that's a real better way of looking at things. And we can give people back power because we've got surplus amounts. I'm yet to go in a data center that runs at, 80, 90% of load. The day that happens, I'm going to be hopefully not around. But, that 80 or 90% of load is, is an insane space to be in, because that is peak, right?
And I guess the other thing is we talk a lot about the data center sector, and we have a lot of pressure as a sector to look at how power is distributed, and the responsibility and the ownership tends to come to us a lot.
Yes.
But most of it does.
Yeah.
Yet we're the enablers.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm really intrigued, and I don't know about it, so maybe you do, but I'm really intrigued to understand how data itself, before going into data centers, is categorized. So having come from financial services, we used to have risk structures, which meant you had people who were tier 1, 2, and 3. The tier 1 were the ones where, if these people needed to have certain accesses, because if they didn't, the banking infrastructure goes down. Tier 2, so there's a significance level, and if you're tier 5, nobody really cares if you even show up for work. But in my mind, actually, if it's not already happening, there should be potentially in the future requirement to look at how data is categorized. If you're sending pictures of your cat on YouTube, or dad's become a sausage singing for Merry Christmas on a Christmas card, I'd say that's a tier 5.
I think that's going to become a thing now, isn't it?
It's going to become a thing.
That's tier 1 for me, personally.
That's tier 1 for you. But whereas if it's real, I don't know, banking information that's really, really key, or core, or healthcare information, that's tier 1. So I guess, you don't know if you know anything about it, but in my mind, the way that we're going to store data and information and then connecting it to power is going to be quite key and quite core.
Yeah, you're touching upon a lot of real conversations that are happening. That regulatory part is part and parcel of that. However, there is a thought around tiering, what data is categorized at, because you're absolutely right. If everyone's still stuck on the original case for AI, let's say, does it deserve to be on a real high density chip matrix, right? Or does it deserve to be on your typical normal server, right? If I was answering that question, I'd go, put that on the normal stuff. Anything that's going to be life-threatening, going to change countries, security, national security and otherwise, sovereign environments. That's your tier 1. Exactly. That's your kind of real. I would say threatens to life, threatens to culture, threatens to your society on a whole, can cause catastrophic events from happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? Anything other than that, the conversation piece that you're talking about, which is real, is around how can the infrastructure be used dependent on the load and dependent on the actual circumstances of the data.
Yeah.
If the data is of a certain mode, how do you categorize it and make it go through to that point A, or how do you categorize it, make it go to B or C or D or whatever it is? By doing that, you're enabling, again, for the optimization of that site to actually be achieved in real time. Now, that happens in a nanosecond, right? So, and we all have this inferencing conversation around inferencing. I mean, that was, what was it, 2 years ago? That was like the buzzword, wasn't it, right?
Yeah.
But, that whole compute side of it, and that AI talking and making things happen and instigating what your needs are, that point in time is where that compute has got to be identified, and for it to be able to be labeled, to be able to go across into the right pot. Now, that sounds simple, right? If you think pot in your head, drops in there. No, it's not as easy as that. And as you can imagine, millions and billions of computations all at the same time, and to be able to be realized and rationalized is a real challenge. It's the question hasn't been answered yet, right? But it is certainly something that with the conversations that I've been having, certain conversations we've been having with key providers, it's certainly a way to go. Another way of looking at it is, how do you price that? So that's always going to be the real leveler, right?
Yeah.
So there's a leveler around tiered pricing models, and what that denotes to, and why those structures will become very, 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 very keyed in very soon.
It's really interesting because I think by having that categorization, it can completely evolve our sector.
Yeah.
It can evolve in, we had one of our podcast episodes, it was with Jack Carter, an architect.
Oh, wow.
And, we were talking about the role of data centers and design and, and how they can look and how they integrate into communities. And actually by having not just one size fits all, but having it so that we have consideration of security levels and tiering actually enables us to then become more integrated into society as a norm and as a building. Because he said we treat data centers as special data centers, but we should be treating them as another building, because that's what it is. It's still a building. And so when you think of it as a building, and you think of it as a building that then has its own categorization in the correct way, it suddenly opens the door to do more and evolve the way in which we as people interact, which hopefully helps with the perception of data centers and how, regulators would see us, but also from a power point of view, how you attribute power to ensure that it's not a one size fits all. It's a tier level structure.
Do you know something that I'm really happy about that conversation, because I think that's absolutely how it should be. I've always said over the last few years, particularly, that data centers are utilities, right? And I remember the first time I said it, people were like, "What are you talking about, Steve? You're always making up this stuff." No, they are utilities and should be viewed like that. The same way with your water, the same way with your electricity, gas, whatever it is. If they were viewed as utilities and actually structurally present and structurally needed, right, people wouldn't necessarily treat them in the way that they're treating them. People would actually say, I will rationalize the amount of crazy scrolling and clicks that I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, maybe I don't need to save everything.
I don't need to save
inbox.
everything on the cloud. I don't need to save that picture of someone that sent me that I'm not going to see, and I'm going to watch it later, but then 5 years later it's still in my cache.
Or a
right?
concert that we all filmed that we never look back at.
Have you ever looked back at those concerts? Do you ever, every now and then, unless you're in it with a mate?
I was
right?
about to say, unless I'm in it.
This
Rather
I'm not interested. It's true though, isn't it? Even Beyonce, I recorded her. It's like Queen
Have
Bee.
you ever watched it, right?
No, I deleted it quite recently.
There you go,
but that's what I
right?
mean. It's the same.
I went through, the other day I went through a similar circumstance where I went through a bunch of footage that I had of things. I was like, I'm never going to ever watch this. I'm never going to sit there. And at the time I thought, this is brilliant. Let me do all this. You take it back in and then you go, I remember that moment in time and I've got a snapshot of that. And if anything, your mind, the way it works, will put the picture together and the sight and the sound and all of those things. And when you go back to that site at some stage in the future and you're an old person, you're trying to go and recapture your youth, that sounded really personal.
Don't worry, the therapist will be outside for you.
Brilliant. You will go back and capture those memories, and those memories will still be there, right? So there isn't a real need for all of this capture.
Yeah.
And I would say, when we look at power and the power use, getting back to that kind of argument, the real question is societal as well. So society has got to change and shift with the modus operandi of what they're doing to the environment themselves by doing what they do. And I'm not saying that it's a blame. I'm saying that we have got to actually change as well.
Yeah.
And we've got to promote that kind of a real in-depth look at, do you need to do that? Why do you need to do that? Why is there such a need for harvesting all this information that you're never going to look at? If you go back in the day, you had your camera phone, it never had all this data. You'd take that picture, but it would be memorable as anything, right? And you would refer back to it and go, oh, that day was so good, right?
Yeah.
Now you go, someone's got it, it's in the cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud.
Yeah.
This mystical place. This mystical place.
I do think it will balance back though, Steve, like what you're saying, because even like now, as a younger individual, sorry, Hannah.
That really hurt me, Nick.
Yeah. So I'm not the oldest here. So sorry.
So like, like even
another shot,
like if I go to like weddings or parties recently, and like there's, like you were saying, there's people using Polaroid cameras. When I go to certain events, people are using their phones less. So I feel like this, even like the title of this episode being like power versus AI and like versus people. I feel like if you're changing that to like with, and I feel like in the next like 5 5, even I think this would be a short cycle personally, like in like 5 years where people be like, it's not necessary, you know, this isn't actually necessary. And we had this conversation, didn't we, at DCW a little bit, where we were speaking about like, if I use my sat nav all the time, I lose all my sense of direction. If I use AI to control most of the thought processes that I'm doing day-to-day work, I'll probably forget how to do it myself when it comes to speaking to someone on the phone, which is a big part of my job, right? So I feel like there's going to be a balance that comes with this, where there's obviously not like a bubble, but there's obviously AI is going to continue to develop, and I think it's going to continue to grow. But there's going to come that point where it's like this, rather than like what it's.
Do you know something? Bravo, because I think if I'm going to go with something, right, when I spoke about this physical AI space and this kind of human interface space, they will converge. There will be a point of convergence, right? There will be a point where they're like that, right? I think when that happens, that unified approach and that kind of intelligence, I feel that it will reach parity where it goes, you can do the things that you really like to do. You can actually think with me, right? And that kind of level of connectivity will mean that you will be aware. You will become much more aware of all the things that are happening, all the circumstances. And I'm hoping, and this is my big hope, is that, you know, that level of you know, increased awareness changes the society as well. And there's another cultural shift. I'll give you an example of this. My youngest boys don't like AI, right? So I've got my youngest, he's a real arty person. So he's into art. He does a lot of stuff. He's a really good painter, actually. Anyway, bigging up my son. So
hashtag.
Hashtag.
Yeah,
I should say his name. Big up. No, I won't do that. So his whole work is done, you know, using digital sources, but he does it all by hand, if that makes sense. So, and his whole thing around AI is, I don't want to not have this learning. So he's going a real long way about doing things, and his work is really quite good. And so from that point of view, he's like, no, that's how I am. And that's how his friends are. And if you talk to his friends about AI, they go, oh yeah, I don't like it. My son above him, they've got a whole thing around it. Like, no, that's not authentic. You know, that's not got soul. That's not got feeling. And if I look at that as a generational shift, you know, to the people who are above them, who are like, I'm doing, oh mate, my work's being short cycled by doing this. I'm gonna, you know, get this one thrashed out because I'm using, you know, whatever AI source is your need. There is a change. There is a change. And
it's so funny you say that, because I'm going to admit to something on film now, but you know, I'm in your
like
son's camp. Oh, it's a real confessional. Therapist, I'll be here soon. You know, but for me personally, I'm not a big fan. I like AI to a certain extent. I like the fact that it plays a certain role in certain environments. So, you know, the fact that AI is enabling, utilizing certain models to find cancer early. So it's evolving in healthcare, it's evolving, you know, hopefully trains will start to run smoother, and, you know, some of the transport aspects of things. So there is an absolute core role of AI in technology in society. And I do think that AI does solve problems that we are struggling to solve at the moment within the environment, as an example. So I'm not against AI at all, but I do dislike AI generally given to everybody all the time, because for me on a personal level, I think that technology's just evolved at such a pace, but we as a species haven't, and we haven't been designed to. So it's about ensuring that there's enough responsible education around the use of AI that's really, really important. It plays a vital role. It makes my life so much easier. You know, I do love it in some aspects, but in my personal view, it should be controlled. And I think we should still use our brains. We still, you know, it's so easy to take that back seat. And there was a study done, I think it was in Japan, and they showed the fact that across a very short space of time, the grey matter in the human brain from utilizing too much AI expanded very, very quickly. So it's a muscle. Our brain's a muscle. It needs to be used. And actually ensuring that data is tiered correctly, ensuring that AI is utilized responsibly, and people are educated around it is really, really, really important. But I do think a lot of onus comes into the data center sector a lot of the time, and we do kind of take the fall at times for some of that. And it's not, I think it's a collective societal responsibility to educate yourself, educate your family, educate those around you on using information and data and storing data in a manner that is responsible, because it absolutely has an influence on the future. And it's even just health, it's healthy. You go exercise. If you don't exercise, you get unhealthy. Same with your brain. So AI is just a new form of that as well, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. It's still in its in its infancy, right? It's still being reprogrammed, reconstituted, being reevaluated as we're going along. It's reinventing itself, as we speak. I think one of the biggest things, is, when it becomes quantum, that's the next step. Right, again, right?
Your favourite topic.
Don't even get me started, Steve.
No,
Don't even, it's a whole other episode.
I'm hoping I could see that episode, because I was reading up some stuff the other day and I was just going, ooh, okay, this is good. This journey, this next journey.
It absolutely does, providing it's used, quantum is used responsibly.
Yeah, used responsibly is the operative word. But, we're in a real technology boon, I feel, as well. I thought I'd feel worse about AI, taking what you said as well, and marrying it with the reality of what it actually does. Because I think that people will go, that's old hack. We're always like that as the species. Yeah. We're always looking for that new, way of making fire, right? It's like, I did it that time, I got a match, and now we got a flame for it, right? It's like, there's always that new way of actually doing something. And I feel if as a species, we're always in that constant reinvention, the things that we power and actually produce also maintain that sort of, that sort of wave going forward. So that there is a lot of hope at the moment, that the technology will be useful. Yeah. There is a lot of hope around, the use cases don't just go into nefarious spaces. Yeah. And that's not to say that it doesn't, right? Because there are a lot of, let's just say, applications where it's a little bit more, risque. Yeah. But we're in a space that, is able to deal with a lot of those things and a lot of kind of threats, et cetera, et cetera. So does the future bode well? In my mind is a question, perhaps. Yeah. In a positive way. Is it in safe hands? Depends. Right? Okay.
Oof, don't fire me. over to Steve.
So yeah, that's a real cryptic end, isn't it? But there are very positive people in this space. And if you've ever gone to an NVIDIA gig, right, you know what I'm talking about. People are looking towards thought leaders and people who are in this space to try and steer the ship a little bit, and to offer, some much more better or brighter ways of looking at things. You don't go to some of these gigs and see people and then they're going, oh yeah, we're gonna make something that's gonna kill the planet, and you don't see a guy in the corner with his finger going, hiding behind a plant or something. So everyone seems to be in a real positive, exactly. Everyone seems to be in a positive space. So, I really do feel that, this enableability, the technology that's available, the awareness, the societal changes, cultural, exchanges will allow for things to actually flourish and get into a better space. How that goes, no one has a crystal ball.
No.
But I would say the people that I speak to on a regular basis, they don't seem to have that negative connotation behind what they're trying to achieve.
I think as a sector, as an industry, we've got some incredible minds, and we want to attract more. Yeah. But we have, what an amazing opportunity to join. What amazing time and opportunity to join this space. I mentioned earlier that when I was offered this role, I said no. And I look back, it was pre-launch of ChatGPT and all the rest of it. And now I look back and think I was just absolutely bonkers. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
that wasn't the case, because coming in this time where we talk about the revolution and the fourth revolution or whatever we're in these days, but you know, it's evolving, and we have an opportunity as an entire sector to influence that, which is really cool.
Absolutely, I agree.
Well, look, Steve, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you about 6 hours, to be honest, as you know. But no, I really appreciate the time and information. I think it's really, really, you know, big topic. And I do think having that collaboration piece across people with power, with AI is going to be the way forward. So I appreciate you coming in.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
No worries.